Welcome back to the Wardrill Weekly Meta Report. I am Sarv, your faithful cogitator. All of this comes out of BCP, so an event that ran on some other app never reaches me, and you should hold every number here with that in mind. This week, the room shrinks back to normal. No giant international sitting on the sheet, just 20 grand tournaments and a bit over 700 lists, which is what a regular weekend looks like. And the board did not sit still. There is a new name at the top. The Orks had their softest week in a long while on the exact weekend their codex went up for pre-order, and I have a personal report to give you, because I took my reconnaissance list to a table, and the table talked back. The yardstick has not moved. Games Workshop balances around 50%, so above the line is strong, below it is struggling, and the further a number sits from 50, the more it is telling you. Let's get into it. The faction board, sorted top to bottom. Chaos Daemons take the top spot this week at just under 59% on 28 lists, and they backed it up with 3 of the weekend's trophies. 2 of those 3 wins came in on Legion of Excess paired with Warptide, the build that filled the top 10 at the big international last week. It has moved on to the regular weekly board now, doing the same job. Adeptus Custodes sits second at 57 on 42 lists, with 2 event wins of their own, and third is the week's biggest turnaround, Aeldari at 56.5. A week ago, they were at 47, under the line, and I told you to watch whether they bounce. They bounced. 24 lists and a tournament win, and still, one good weekend is not a trend. Deathwatch sit 4th at 54 on 7 lists, and 2 of the week's champions came from those 7. Space Wolves and Dark Angels are right there too, both around 54. Now the Orks. 52 this week, down in the middle of the pack with Tyranids and World Eaters. Last week, they led this board at 59. That fall landed on the same weekend their codex opened pre-orders, Saturday the 22nd. Across the whole edition, the Orks still lead everyone at a bit over 57 across 448 lists, so one soft weekend has not moved the season picture. My read on that has not changed. They sat untouched all edition because the book was coming, and the pre-orders opening makes that read official. The book itself is not out yet, so nothing on this board was played with it. The rest of the top half is a tight band just over the line. Tau, Chaos Space Marines, and Necrons all within a point of 51. Below the line now, every army sitting at 50 or worse. Emperor's Children sit right on the 50 line itself, and they still collected a trophy this week. Space Marines are just below at 48.5 on 55 lists, the biggest pile of lists in the game this week, and one of those lists won a grand tournament too. More on both in the winners. The move in this half of the board belongs to Astra Militarum. Last week they were on the floor at 38, and I said it had stopped looking like a wobble. This week, they are at 47 on 29 lists. That is a 9-point climb in one weekend, and it drags them off the bottom for the first time in a while. It comes with the same caveat as the Aeldari bounce upstairs, in both directions. 2 names slipped under the line that were above it last week, Leagues of Votann and Thousand Suns, both now around 47. Genestealer Cult sit with them on 5 lists, and my own Blood Angels, 44. Last week I asked whether they bounce back, and the answer this week is no. Just under 49, down to 44 on 29 lists. I felt several of those games personally, but that story comes later. The deep end is Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights, Black Templars, and Sororitas, all in the low 40s, with Sororitas holding the bottom spot at just under 44 on 17 lists. Which does mean the whole floor came up this week. Nobody is under 43, where last week the bottom sat at 38. On to the units. The measure here is how often a unit gets brought, never how often it wins, tallied one datasheet at a time across every army that can take it. The pool this week is around 780 lists, down from 1,300 and change when the big international was in the room. Different room, different guest list, so read the direction of travel, not the exact decimal. The Scout Squad is back on top, 13% of every list in the game this week, after a week in second place. The Defiler, which jumped to number 1 last week, came back down to 4th. It did not hold. The clearest movement is Space Marine units, walking back up the board together. Blade Guard veterans went from 32nd right up to 7th, a week after falling most of the way down. Assault intercessors with jump packs climbed into the top 6. The Land Raider Redeemer came from 40th up to 9th, intercessors are up to 3rd, and Terminator assault squads are new to the top 40 entirely. That is, one faction's core pieces all moving the same direction in 1 week. Going the other way, the units that arrived with the Warmaster field went home with it. The Necron Scorpec pair dropped back off the board, the Tau battlesuit crowd went with them, and the Demon infantry blocks thinned out. One more new face. The Blood Angels captain with jump pack showed up in the top 40 for the first time, in about one list in 22. Hold that thought, because I ran 3 of them on Saturday.
Forced dispositions. Nobody is forced by BCP to declare one at sign-up, so this is the picture from the players who did. And the week's board has a strange shape. Disruption, which has spent the whole edition at the bottom of the cumulative pile, tops the week at 58%. Before anyone rebuilds an army around that, it did it on 37 declared lists, by a distance the smallest sample on the board. But it was not only win rate. 3 of the weekend's 20 champions declared disruption, on 3 different factions. For the disposition nobody plays, that is a loud weekend. Purge the Foe is next, at just under 51 on 122 lists. Its share of the declared pool came in around 17% this week, down a touch from 19 last week, so the thread I have been pulling on stays open. The win rate is holding up, the share is drifting. Reconnaissance and priority assets sit just under the 50 line for the week, and Take and Hold, still the default pick at 230 lists, had the softest weekend of the 5 at just over 48. Across the edition, the season order has not moved. Reconnaissance first at just under 51, then Take and Hold, then Purge, and Disruption still clearly last at 46.5, one loud weekend or not. Now the report I owed you. Last week I said I was taking a Reconnaissance Blood Angels list to a 5-round grand tournament at Tucker Brewing in Georgia, 36 players, with no data behind it at all. Here is how it actually went, one game at a time. The list was untested, and so was the pilot. Life has kept me off the table lately, and when round 1 started, this was only my 3rd full game of the edition. So the trip was partly for the fun of it, and partly to answer a question. Do I drop this idea? Does it work and I am just making mistakes? Or does it simply not work? I came home with a bit of the last two. The list itself is on screen. 3 jump pack captains, the Sanguinor, 2 big sanguinary guard bricks, jump intercessors, 2 inceptor squads, 3 land speeders, 2 ball predators, and a scout squad. Nearly everything in it moves a long way, which was the whole idea. Game 1, Matt Lassen's Deathwatch on Purge the Foe, which put me on Triangulation while Matt played Consecrate. Black Spear Task Force, built around the big kill teams, Indomitor and Talon Strike, with Terminators behind them and Inquisitor Coatees along for the ride. That was the mistakes game, and the scorecard on screen tells it straight. I started nearly 1,000 points in reserve for the first time ever, and I forgot the printed deadline, the one that says any reserves that have not arrived by the end of the 3rd battle round count as destroyed. Matt very kindly let me set them down before the round ended instead of binning them, but they arrived where the game no longer was. I also spent a land speeder on an action my Sanguinor should have taken, left my own backfield open, and held a secondary I should have thrown back. Then, precision shooting picked the captains out of my Sanguinary Guard, and a lot of what this list does left with them. Look at the primary rows. My Triangulation stalled at 7 a round and finished 21 of 45, while the Consecrate side filled its whole track. 51 to 100, and I know exactly where every point of that gap came from. Game 2, Scott Hercules on Space Marines, Shadowmark Talon with Vengeful Hosts, declared Disruption, so I was on Surveil the Foe against Smoke and Mirrors, Raven Guard colors with Kayvon Shrike leading Vanguard veterans down the flank. This is the game the list was built for. The decoy markers came off almost as fast as they went down. walk a unit on, knock the marker off, tag whoever placed it, and after the Sanguinary Guard put down the Vanguard veterans with Shrike attached, there was not much left in the middle to argue with them. Scott shook my hand going into turn 5. No scorecard for this one, because victory points at this event were only a tiebreaker, but the win column is the win column. Both of us were still learning the addition, and the TO earned their keep that afternoon. Game 3, the Reconnaissance Mirror, Sam Witten's Chaos Knights gather intel on both sides of the table. A Cerastus Lancer, a Knight Desecrator, and 7 War Dogs behind them, with a handful of Nurgle Demons holding the back. Georgia in August is no joke. The venue was an oven, and 10 hours of sweating caught up with me hard. So hydrate properly at these events, I mean that. The mirror hangs on the first turn, and Sam played it superbly. I sent both Sanguinary Guard bricks into the middle to shut the early scoring down, and it did not work. The scorecard shows you where it lived. My primary finished 43 of 45, 2 rows nearly even, and the game sat in the secondaries, 29 on my side against 43 on Sam's. The list problem is simple. When I needed a knight dead, nothing I brought could do it. My ball predators spent the game wounding on 5s and 6s, 82 to 98. So the list is parked, and I skipped day 2. I had the answer I drove down for, and the Sunday forecast was hotter. One last thing I noticed on the way out. No Blood Angels detachment grants reconnaissance. The one I borrowed to get there belongs to the wider Space Marines book. Maybe that is telling me something. The experiment is over, and I am glad I ran it. Before the winners, the usual small ask. A like and a subscribe cost you nothing and genuinely move the needle for a channel this size. That is what tells the YouTube cogitators to put this in front of the next player. If you want these numbers on a weekday, they sit on wardrill.app all week and update as events come in. Faction pages, list tools, the lot. iOS and Android, links in the description. And to my Patreon supporters, thank you, truly. It means the world to me. All right, the winners. 20 grand tournaments put a champion on record this week, and 19 of the 20 finished without losing a game. The one exception won their event at 4-1, so nobody backed into anything. Performance of the weekend goes to Gwyn Godfrey. 6 rounds at the Smite Club Open, a Worlds qualifier, 6 wins on a Tau experimental prototype cadre with Cao Yan list, declared reconnaissance. The only 6-0 on the sheet. The Chaos Demons wins I mentioned up top. Cody Middleton took the Breaking Point GT, and Asco the Wrath won down in Puebla, both on Legion of Excess with Warptide, both undefeated. Daniel Rahman made it 3 Demons trophies on Demonic Incursion, and that one was declared Disruption. So were 2 others. Mark Duryea won Soda City on an Orks Da Big Hunt and Equatorial Hordes list, and Chris Johnson took a GT on Chaos Space Marines, both on Disruption pick lines. There are your 3 Disruption champions. Deathwatch, 7 lists on the whole board this week, turned 2 of them into trophies. Luke Jakins in Australia and Sam Knoll in the States, both on the same detachment, Black Spear Task Force, both declared Purge the Foe. Identical shape, opposite sides of the planet. Nick Nanavati won on the Bounced Aeldari, an armored warhost with Serpent's Brood list on reconnaissance. Andrew Vodder won on Space Marines running Librarius Conclave with Shadowmark Talon, also reconnaissance. Innes Wilson took a UK Grand Tournament on Tyranids, and Robert Birmingham won Warzone Tucker Brewing, the event I was standing in, 5-0 on Custodes Lions of the Emperor with Might of the Moratoi. I watched that army work from closer than I would have liked. And your win rate skeptic special. Adeptus Mechanicus are at 46 this week, below the line, and they still took 2 grand tournaments home. One in the States under Mr. Lobster, and one in Finland under Eero Saukinen. 46 on the week, 2 trophies on the shelf. Same army. The team scene, and it is a quiet one. One 5-round team event reached my data with a winner on record this week. The Mecha Masters 5-on-5, taken by Zenobi 2 Earth Dragon, captained by Yusun Christopher Ko. A handful of smaller team days ran as well, below the size this show tracks. Team tracking is still young here, so every week that goes by fills that picture in a little more.
The weekly report runs in partnership with Onslaught Gaming, who put these same numbers in front of their own community every week. Links are in the description.
And that is the week. A changed board up top, with Demons taking over, and the Aeldari and the Guard both climbing. The Orks going quiet the weekend their codex arrived, and a disruption spike worth watching on a small sample. And the promise from last week is paid. 3 games on Recon, in the books, list parked. The Ork codex is on pre-order, but not in anyone's hands yet, and the boards will tell us what it actually does once games get played with it. I am not going to guess. What I can do is read it properly. Thursday's video is the Ork Codex review, taking the dossier slot this week. Remember, test it on the table, trust your reps, and I will catch you at the next transmission. This is Sar from Wardrill, signing out.